What is up, everyone? So today I have a review of the Vanguard Veo 2 Go tripod. This is the 235 CB. We're going to go over its price point, its features, and whether or not it's a good purchase. So let's get into this review and see what it's all about. Okay, so before you purchase a tripod, you want to look for three things, okay? You want to first determine the weight, all right? So how much weight your tripod needs to hold, okay? Next, you want to determine the height of the tripod that you need it to be at. As far as if you're taking photos, of course you want it at eye level. If you don't want to be hunched over taking those photos, but you're going to have to compromise with how compact it gets as well, so keep that in mind. And lastly, you want to determine what type of material you want it made out of. So aluminum or carbon fiber, okay? This one happens to be carbon fiber, and the reason for that is, the reason why I chose carbon fiber is because it's a lot more stout than the aluminum versions, and we'll go over that when I get into the features, why I would choose carbon fiber over aluminum. So the Veo 2 has a few different models, okay? This one has 4 adjustments and 5 limbs. So if you count this as a limb, it's gonna have 5. So what that means is you got 4 adjustments, and then they extend out 5 times, okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 limbs, okay? The Veo 2 also comes in the versions with less adjustments. And that's another thing that you got to consider, is how many adjustments you want, okay? If you get the least amount of adjustments, you're going to save a lot more money. I think it's around $130 versus $200, okay? There's a pro and a con to that. So if you have more adjustments on the legs, that means that you could get a more compact tripod, and it's going to allow you to put this in a backpack and stow it away a lot easier. If you get the least amount of adjustments, it's going to be a lot longer in its collapsed overall size. Okay, so should you buy the tripod with most adjustments or the least adjustments? That's going to depend. If you're have a facility where this is going to stay stationary, or office or space or whatever you have, the more adjustments is not the way to go, okay? And the reason for that is because each one of these limbs, as they adjust, they get smaller. So as you can see, you go from this larger limb to this real tiny limb here, okay? And when it gets smaller, it's not going to be as stout, okay? The other model, where it only has, say, 2 or 3 adjustments, you're just looking at the thickness of these 3 limbs here, okay? And the nice thing about that is they're going to be full length, okay? The full length of the tripod, just like this one, but they're going to be a lot more stout, because there's a lot more surface area for the bushing to touch. So it'll create a more rigid design. But if you're like me and you're on the go a lot, and you're doing all kinds of videoing outdoors and what have you, I definitely recommend the one with the multiple adjustments, because this one's going to be able to go in a backpack a lot easier and not stick out in its collapsed state, okay? So those are some considerations you're going to need to make. Okay, so for the Vanguard Veo 2, for the ball head itself, you have this plate that comes off, all right? And it's your standard plate for your camera. You have this little plunger here. It pushes up and down so it moves. And what this allows you to do is, once you fix this on your camera, you could slide this on, and you're not going to have to worry about your camera just bumping off if this thing gets loose. So it holds it in place even if it's loose, okay? So keep that in mind when purchasing a tripod, is you want to make sure your ball head has that as well. You have a level, okay? I don't really use a level, but A lot of professionals will appreciate the level part. You have, it doesn't have the 1/4-20. It's actually screwed in the opposite way. So there's no stud sticking out that's a 1/4-20 on these ball heads for your plate systems. And that's typical. As you make your way to the top of the head, after removing the ball head, you have this piece here, which allows you to do 1/4-20 or 3/8 ball head sizes. And then you have your 3/8 tap in there, okay? So you always have it with you, whether or not, if you need to put, say, a camera directly on here, you could still do it with the 1/4-20 on top, okay? Another thing is you have this rubber pad, base pad for grip, and then you have a set screw here. So once you put the ball head on, at the very bottom underneath here, you want to screw that up into the ball head to keep it from rotating. So that way when you're doing those pan motions, your ball head doesn't unscrew. All right, for the limbs, okay, the top section of the limb, you have 2 adjustments here, and then 2 extensions for the post, okay? And you have this piece here. All it is, I recommend you doing this to any tripod you have, even if you don't have this on it. Just take it apart and you could put one of these O-rings on it. And the nice thing about the O-ring is if you have a lot of weight, you could set it like something like that, right? If you have a lot of weight and you forget to hold it while you're tightening it, it's going to slam down. And what that O-ring does is absorb the impact, and it doesn't damage your adjustments here. Okay, so the very top of your adjustment here does not twist, which is nice because once you have it at full height, so once you tighten it up at full height, you could still make minor adjustments here up and down without having to worry about your camera moving from left to right, okay? If you decide to adjust the bottom right here, it will rotate in the collar. So keep that in mind if you're trying to keep the same shot. But so for your headstock, okay, you have a removable spring-loaded weight holder, okay? And then this piece right here that it screws into is aluminum, and it's pinned on the side. The pin is pretty stout, so it's not gonna come undone, but I would like to have had some type of Allen in there maybe, so that way if it did back out, I don't have to tap it in. But it could be glued, so it's no big deal. But all this is aluminum. You do have a rubber O-ring, all right? And what that allows you to do is when you fully collapse this, it acts as a bumper, so that way you don't damage your carbon fiber or your aluminum, okay? You have a spring-loaded weight holder. I don't like these L-shape or J-shape, whatever you want to call them. I don't like them, as you can see. And the reason for that is because it could offset your weight to one side. It's not really a big deal, but in a designer viewpoint, it would have been better if they came off center and then had an eye bolt that like looped around with the opening, so that way you could hang your weight directly in the center and not have it sway back and forth. Just personal preference, and it's a lot better because the center of mass will be lined up with the headstock. Okay, for leg adjustments, you have this angle, okay? That's about 45 degrees. Click it one more, and it's gonna click out a little bit further. Click it one more, and it's almost perpendicular to the headstock itself, giving you a full 90 almost. Okay, it's a little less than 90. Another thing you want to consider when purchasing this tripod or any other ones is the bushings inside. So the more sections you have, the smaller the bushings are going to be at the end of the legs here. Okay, so the bushing in here that allows this adjustment is going to be a lot more, it's going to be shorter and also a lot more smaller in diameter. The reason why I bring this up is because the smaller in diameter, it doesn't spread out the load to a large enough surface, so it's going to be more prone to cracking. Also, you want to make sure that the bushings are thick. So the thicker the bushing, the stronger it's going to be. I had a tripod that I used about 5 to 10 times, and the bushings cracked inside. Even in the larger ones, they cracked because they were super thin, and I didn't put a lot of load. I just had the GoPro on top for the uses that I had it for. And over time they just cracked because they're super thin. So a thicker bushing is good. So make sure before you purchase any tripod that you look at the bushings inside to determine if they're going to be worth, or if the tripod's going to be worth buying. Or to make your tripod smooth, you want a thick grease in the column that you unscrew here. Okay, so when you take it all the way out, it should be a thick grease. You have this nice aluminum collar here with the grip all the way around it. Okay, that's typical. And then you have your bushing right here. So for this bushing, as you can see, it's kind of thin. So a lot of them are super thin like this. If you could get a thicker bushing, I'd prefer that because it's least likely to crack. The nice thing about this design is it's a 2-section bushing, so you got a bushing here and a bushing over here. The one I had actually had a cap on top, so it was like a almost like a plug, but there was a slot on the side, so that way it would slide where the carbon fiber seams together. But I prefer these 2 sections to be by themselves, because you might be able to find a tube, and then you could cut it and then use that as a bushing if they ever cracked. If not, and you got to buy proprietary bushings, be prepared to pay about $20 for a set or more, and then shipping. Okay, but if it's under warranty, they should send them out to you for free. So this is a 2-part bushing system. As you can see, you got 2 little nubs and then 2 holes right here. Okay, that has to align, and you'll have a gap here and a gap on this side. And what this allows you to do is when you insert this back into the tube, the seam of the other carbon fiber insert, so if you look in here, you could see a seam right here. So that's going to slide in between this gap. Okay, I do prefer a 2-piece bushing because you could buy any type of tube that's pretty close to the size, cut it in half and get it to fit if you don't want to spend money for the original bushings themselves, because they could get pretty pricey. Some are like $20 for a set plus shipping. If it's under warranty, they should give them to you for free. But keep that in mind, is being able to acquire parts easy. So just because you got a good deal on a tripod that's carbon fiber, if it's a Chinese tripod directly from China, you may have issues with finding replacement parts. Okay, so when inserting this setup here, at the very bottom you have the seam. So what I'm going to do is have the gap facing the bottom so it could align perfectly. Slide it up and then make your limb slide in and then tighten it. One thing you want to keep in mind is your limb, rule of thumb, your limb is, or your bushing is going to be the length of this knuckle here. So if this knuckle is huge, your bushing's probably the same length as this. Okay, so that's another thing that, or characteristic that you want to look for in a tripod, is having larger locking points will mean that you're going to have a lot better support, and it's going to be a lot more rigid. But if you don't, and you have a small tripod like this, like I said, at the smallest limb, slide it in a little bit and then tighten it, because Now that's going to extend all the way into here, giving you a lot more, less play and taking up that area, making it a lot more rigid. So one of the biggest issues with tube style tripods, Peak Designs made one that was like flat. But the biggest issue with these is, as you can see, at its full collapse state, the legs taper in, okay? And that's because the head piece up here is a lot wider than the base, and your extensions also come to a smaller point, okay? But the design with the tubular style tripods is you got all this gap that's wasted space that bulks up your tripod, and on something that's portable and ready to go, that's kind of an issue, because it's like you got this big old thing now you got to deal with in diameter, okay? That's just personal preference. So this is what the full piece tripod looks like, okay? So when it's in this state, it actually is supposed to fold upward like so. All right, so you fold it all the way up, and then you loosen up your head tube right here, allow it to go all the way up to the top, and then fold it inward, and now you have a way more compact setup to stow away. All right, so that's what it should look like at its smallest compact form, and we'll take measurements on that and show you what that looks like. But before I show you on the inside, this is what your spring mechanism looks like for the adjustments on your legs. I don't know if you could see that well, but it's like a mousetrap spring is what it looks like. Okay, so for the grip itself, you're looking at just a regular foam grip. It's pretty robust. I mean, it spins. But as far as its, it lasting, I'd say this would last pretty good because I am the second owner of this, so it's not brand new. Then again, I don't use this as much, okay? But for your limbs, as you can see, you have just a regular Allen screw and brass bushings in there. And as you tighten those, it's going to make your leg a lot stiffer or looser. One thing that I do not like about this tripod, and it's probably in other tripods as well, is even though after I tighten this, after a few times using it, it gets real loose right away. So I recommend putting a little dot of Loctite on each one of the screws to prevent that. Also, I'm not a fan of this pin right here. Even though it hasn't happened on this model, over time I could see that working out on its own and causing you an issue. At its most compact size, you're looking at 12 3/4 inches in size. I'd round that up to 13 inches. And for the diameter, you're looking at, I'd say about 3 1/4 inches in diameter, okay? So it's a small tripod. Overall height is going to be highly affected by that though. The smaller the tripod, typically you won't get as much height, okay? Okay, at full extension, your overall height, you're looking at 55 3/4 inches tall. That's with the ball head. And without the ball head, you're looking at 52 inches to this base plate, okay? As far as the footprint's concerned, at the triangle, the base of the triangle, you're looking at 28 inches in diameter, okay? So that's how wide it's gonna be. So overall, it's a compact setup at a pretty decent price if you could get it used, which I recommend. Don't buy it new. I don't believe it's worth the $200. Okay, so let's go over the pros and the cons and whether or not you should buy this tripod. Okay, so the verdict. First of all, do I recommend carbon fiber versus aluminum? 100%. If you could afford the carbon fiber, definitely. And the reason for that is the carbon fiber is going to look nicer for a lot longer because you don't have to worry about the anodizing, getting all scratched and stuff when you're sliding it in and out. Also, when you get to the smallest limb here, okay, what ends up happening on the aluminum one is it flexes a lot more on this smaller diameter, okay? Because I've had aluminum tripods and that was a big deal, and that's why now I just buy all carbon fiber. Okay, so my final thoughts on this, aluminum or carbon fiber, I would recommend the carbon fiber 100%. I'd never buy aluminum, and the reason being is once you get to the small leg here, there's a lot of flex in the aluminum. It's less rigid, and to me it doesn't hold up as well, and it doesn't look nice after using it a lot. Okay, you'll get scratches in the anodizing and stuff, and it just doesn't look as good as the carbon fiber for longevity use. Okay, so spend a little bit more and buy something of good quality because you're going to use it all the time. All right. Do I recommend having this real compact setup with the multiple limbs, or the one with the least amount of limbs and more stout? And that depends on your application. If you have somewhere to put it and leave it up and that's all you're going to do with it, I recommend the one with least adjustments. And that's because your limbs are going to be a lot more larger, and it's going to be a lot more rigid because there's more surface for this friction adjustment to really clamp onto, okay, and create a more stout tripod. Also, if you start extending these out, like this small one, out to the maximum, I recommend pushing it in a little bit. So bringing it in just a slight bit, so if that's fully extended, I'd say about 1/4 inch, and then locking it down, and that's going to stiffen it up a lot more. Of course, it's going to take away from the overall height, but it's going to stiffen it up a lot more because you have that much more in the tube that's going to allow the tube to play off of and not allow it to wiggle just on a little tiny leaf in there. Would I buy more sections or less sections as far as the adjustments are concerned here? I definitely would buy the more adjustment section pieces, that style tripod, and the reason being is because I take this everywhere. So if I go camping, I'll take it with me, so I need something compact. If I had a studio and that's all it was meant to do is be in the studio and stuff, I would definitely rather prefer the least amount of adjustments. And the reason for that is because you're going to have a lot larger tube. Okay, it's going to be a lot larger in size, but since it's going to be a stationary tripod, you don't have to worry about size. So the least amount of adjustments you have here, it's going to be a lot more rigid, and it's just going to perform a lot better. And as far as this ball head's concerned, I mean, it's an amazing ball head. Just the ergonomics behind the levers and stuff is really good. And then the fact that they have this little locking set screw here to lock the ball head on so it doesn't unspin is a nice touch. So that's that portion of it. Now for the issues I have with this tripod, okay? So the price point at $200, I would not recommend it. At a price point of $100, I definitely recommend it. And the reason for this is because these screws here, okay? So when you tighten these all the way up, okay, they're real stiff, they lock in, but after a few uses, these come undone, okay? And it's floppy. It's really floppy, the leg. So I recommend, if you do have one of these, to use Loctite on there, because you're going to be pretty pissed off and screwed if you're out and about and trying to use this tripod and you don't have an Allen key to tighten it, and this thing just is super loose and your tripod does this while you're trying to get it into position. That's a no-go in my book. Also, another thing that, not particularly this tripod, but all tripods in general, is this head tube section here. I wish that they would do something like Peak Designs and utilize the whole space, because as you can see, there's gaps in here, okay? So you have this large diameter for no reason. It could be brought in a lot closer and really make this a lot more compact, and even turn it into something like a selfie stick if need be, you know. One tripod does everything, right? Because they do have tripods where the leg will come undone here and you could use it as a monopod. So, I mean, there's endless possibilities with that type of stuff. Another issue that I foresee is pins like this, as far as the adjustments here. Having a roll pin in there, it's probably a press fit, but if a screw could come undone, I would think that eventually the roll pin will back out, and that's just not for this tripod, but for all tripods that have this design, okay? So those are the things that I would keep an eye out for in a tripod if you're deciding on it. But like I said, I'd recommend this for around the $100 range. That $200 range, I'd say pass on it. So that's going to complete this little review on this Vanguard Veo 2 Go tripod 235 CB. If you like this video, if you like this review, give it a thumbs up. It's always greatly appreciated. If you want to see content like this and other content I'll be posting in the near future, consider subscribing. Until next time, I'll see y'all in the next one. Thanks for watching.